My beloved child. Your soulmate is closer than ever to telling you something they have spent far too long trying to hide. And when those words finally leave their mouth, "I've been living a lie," you may realize that the person you thought you knew was only part of the story. Something happened recently that made pretending almost impossible for them. A simple question was asked in a quiet moment, and instead of answering, they froze. Their expression changed. Their voice disappeared. Because the truthful answer would have exposed everything they had carefully kept separated from you. But here is what makes this confession different: they are no longer afraid only of being discovered. They are terrified that once you know who they really are, you may look at every memory between you differently. Don't skip, because the secret isn't simply about something they did. It reaches much deeper into why they kept pulling away whenever the connection between you became too real. For a long time, your soulmate believed they could protect this hidden part of themselves by controlling what you were allowed to see. They showed confidence when they felt uncertain. They acted detached when your absence was affecting them more than anyone knew. And whenever you came close to asking the one question they could not answer honestly, they found a reason to create distance. You may have wondered why someone who seemed to care could suddenly become so difficult to understand. Now the pattern is beginning to make sense. Someone close to them recently noticed the same contradiction and confronted them about it. How much longer are you going to keep pretending? That question hit harder than expected. Your soulmate didn't defend themselves. They simply lowered their eyes and admitted something startling: if they knew the real me, I don't know if they would still want me. But what could possibly make them believe that? And why have they been convinced for so long that revealing their true identity would cost them the person they care about most? Then came the moment that changed everything. Your soulmate was alone, looking at an old reminder connected to you, when they finally admitted what they had been avoiding. The lie had stopped protecting them. Now it was destroying the possibility of ever being genuinely known by you. They began writing what they wanted to tell you, erased it, started again, and stopped at the same sentence every time: "There's something about me you never knew." But this time, they didn't delete it. They kept going. They wrote about the version of themselves everyone else expects them to be, the choices they made to preserve that image, and the truth they feared would disappoint you. Yet just before explaining the biggest secret, they wrote one more sentence that changes the meaning of everything: "The reason I disappeared wasn't because I stopped loving you. I disappeared because someone discovered who I really was." And the identity of that person, and what they threatened to reveal, is the part your soulmate has never confessed to anyone. That person was never supposed to know. Somehow, they had uncovered a piece of your soulmate's past that had been carefully buried beneath years of carefully chosen explanations and half-truths. At first, your soulmate tried to dismiss it. They said it didn't matter anymore. But then came a sentence that made their stomach drop: "Does the person you love know any of this?" Suddenly, you became part of the secret. Your soulmate realized someone else now had the power to tell you before they could explain it themselves. That was when their behavior toward you changed. The strange distance. The unanswered words. The moments when they almost reached for you and then pulled back. You may have thought they were losing interest, but behind that silence was a completely different fear. They were trying to decide which would hurt more: losing you because they disappeared, or watching your face change when you finally learned the truth. What makes this even more complicated is that the hidden truth isn't one simple lie. It began years before you became emotionally important to them. Your soulmate had built an identity around being the person everyone expected: strong, composed, successful in ways others could understand, and untouched by the past. But privately, they knew that image wasn't complete. There were decisions they had never explained. Relationships they had described differently. Even certain details about their life had been carefully edited whenever someone came too close. Then you appeared, and something unexpected happened. You weren't satisfied with the surface version. You noticed the pauses. You sensed when their smile didn't match what they were feeling. And instead of making them feel exposed, you made them feel seen. That frightened them more than rejection ever had, because for the first time, they wanted to tell someone everything. But there was one particular truth they still couldn't bring themselves to say. Now that truth is sitting in an unfinished confession meant for you. Your soulmate has read it repeatedly, changing certain words but refusing to erase the most important sentence. You fell for someone who wasn't being completely honest about who they were. Stay till the end, because what follows that sentence reveals why they believe your entire connection could change overnight. They admit that the person you met was real, the feelings were real, the moments were real, and what they felt for you was never part of the deception. The lie was about the life surrounding those feelings. And just when they finally decided they would rather risk losing you than continue hiding, another message appeared on their phone. It came from the same person who knew their secret. There were only a few words on the screen: "Tell them tonight, or I will." But underneath that warning was an attachment your soulmate had never seen before, and the moment they opened it, they realized even they had not known the entire truth. The attachment changed the entire confession. Your soulmate had expected proof of the secret they already knew was vulnerable, but instead, they found something much older, a document connected to a decision their family had made years ago. At first, they thought it had to be a mistake. Then they saw a familiar name, followed by details they had never been told. Their hands went cold. Suddenly, the story they had repeated about their own past no longer matched what was sitting in front of them. That meant something disturbing. Part of the life they had been hiding from you had also been hidden from them. And now the person threatening to expose everything knew both versions. Your soulmate stared at the screen and whispered, "So they lied to me too." But why? And what could possibly be important enough for someone to protect that lie for all these years? Instead of answering the threatening message, your soulmate called the one family member who might know the truth. There was silence on the other end when they mentioned the document. Not confusion. Recognition. That reaction told them everything they needed to know. "You knew about this, didn't you?" they asked. The answer came quietly: "There were reasons we never told you." Your soulmate became furious, not because the past was complicated, but because they suddenly understood how much of their identity had been shaped by information other people controlled. Even worse, that family member knew about you. They admitted they had been afraid your connection would eventually make your soulmate start questioning old stories. Think about that. What was it about you that made everyone so nervous? Why would simply becoming closer to you threaten something that had remained hidden for years? Then the conversation took an unexpected turn. The family member said, "Before you tell them anything, you need to know why you were kept away." Your soulmate stopped breathing for a second. Kept away. Those words suggested their distance from you had never been entirely their own choice. Suddenly, certain warnings from the past sounded different. The pressure to move on. The strange insistence that you two were wrong for each other. The constant reminders that revealing too much would create problems. Your soulmate had believed those people were protecting them, but now another possibility was forming. Maybe they were protecting the secret instead. And that realization finally pushed your soulmate toward a decision. They opened your conversation, began typing, and this time they didn't erase anything. "I need to see you. There's something I should have told you a long time ago. I've been living a lie." But before they could send it, the family member revealed exactly what had been hidden, and your soulmate immediately understood why everyone had been terrified of you discovering it. The truth was more personal than your soulmate expected. The family member finally admitted that years ago, when your soulmate was still learning what kind of life they were supposed to build, the family had created a carefully controlled version of their past. Certain failures were hidden. Certain relationships were rewritten. Even the reason behind one major turning point in their life had been changed because the real story would have embarrassed people who cared more about appearances than honesty. Your soulmate had unknowingly carried that polished story forward, repeating parts of it until they almost believed it completely. But one detail had always bothered them, a missing period of time they could never fully explain. Now they finally knew what happened during it. And suddenly, the person threatening to expose them wasn't holding just one secret. They had evidence that could unravel the entire identity your soulmate had spent years trying to maintain. But your name entered the conversation for a reason no one expected. The family member confessed that when your soulmate first became serious about you, everyone noticed a change. They started questioning things they had previously accepted without argument. They wanted to stop pretending. They even asked for old records and demanded explanations about stories that never quite added up. That frightened the people around them. Not because there was anything wrong with you, but because being loved by you made your soulmate want to become honest. "You were different after meeting them," the family member admitted. "You stopped being satisfied with the version of yourself we gave you." Those words landed hard. Your soulmate finally understood why your connection had faced so much resistance. You weren't the problem. You were the person who made the lie impossible to keep living. And there was still one question they needed answered: who had started the deception in the first place? The answer came with a name your soulmate recognized immediately. Someone they had trusted deeply had been involved from the beginning, the same person who repeatedly encouraged them to keep their distance from you. Suddenly, old conversations returned with completely different meanings. "Don't tell them too much. You'll regret opening that door. Some things are better left buried." Your soulmate once heard those words as advice. Now they sounded like warnings designed to protect someone else. Something huge is waiting for you, because this was the moment fear finally turned into determination. Your soulmate returned to the message they had written for you and pressed send. No more deleting. No more disappearing. No more pretending. But seconds later, another message arrived from the person behind the lie. Before you confess, ask yourself one question: do you really want them to know what you did to keep this secret? Your soulmate went completely still, because there was one choice from their past they had deliberately left out of the confession. That missing choice was the one thing your soulmate could never blame on their family. Years ago, when they first realized pieces of their story didn't add up, they were given an opportunity to challenge everything. Instead, they stayed silent. They accepted the easier version because exposing the truth would have meant disappointing people whose approval once controlled nearly every decision they made. Later, when you entered their life, they had another chance. You asked an innocent question about their past, and for one terrifying second, they almost told you everything. But they looked into your eyes and gave you the same rehearsed explanation everyone else had been hearing for years. That memory has haunted them ever since. Because whatever deception began around them eventually became a lie they personally chose to continue, and now they know they cannot confess who they really are without admitting that part too. Your soulmate began rewriting the message, but this time they stopped trying to make themselves look innocent. They wrote, "There's something you deserve to know. People taught me to hide parts of myself, but eventually I started helping them hide those parts too." Then they admitted something even harder. There were moments when they deliberately pushed you away because your questions were getting dangerously close to the truth. Remember those sudden changes you could never understand? The warmth followed by distance? The conversations that seemed meaningful until they abruptly shut down? Your soulmate now realizes those moments probably made you question whether the connection was ever genuine. And that is exactly what they fear most. Their feelings for you were real. Their fear was real too. But how do you explain that without sounding like you're making excuses? For the first time, your soulmate understands that confession isn't about controlling your reaction. It's about finally giving you the truth and allowing you to decide what happens afterward. Then your soulmate noticed something strange about the warning they had received. The sender had mentioned what they did to keep this secret, but there was no way that person should have known about the private conversation where your soulmate lied to you. Unless someone had told them. Don't skip, because this discovery changes who can be trusted. Your soulmate went back through old messages and found a detail they had overlooked. The person behind the threat had been communicating with someone much closer to them than anyone realized. Suddenly, this wasn't just about protecting a family secret. Someone had been watching your relationship develop, learning exactly when your soulmate became vulnerable with you and interfering whenever the truth came too close. Your soulmate immediately made a call and asked one question: "Were you telling them everything about us?" There was a long silence before the answer came: "I was trying to stop you from making the biggest mistake of your life." But what they called the mistake was not falling in love with you. It was something your soulmate had planned to reveal specifically because of you. Your soulmate had planned to reveal the one thing everyone believed must remain buried, the real story behind the life they had presented to you. Not because you demanded answers, but because being close to you made pretending feel unbearable. They had quietly gathered old messages, dates, and documents, trying to separate what was true from what they had merely been taught to repeat. And then they made a private decision. The next time they saw you, they would tell you everything, even if the truth destroyed the image you had of them. Somehow, that plan reached the person who had been interfering. That was the mistake they were desperate to prevent. Your soulmate finally asked, "Why does it matter so much if they know who I really am?" The response came immediately: "Because once they know, you'll start asking who benefited from keeping you confused." That sentence opened another door. Your soulmate began looking differently at every person who had encouraged the lie. Certain people had gained influence because your soulmate depended on their version of the past. Others had been able to control important choices simply by saying, "Trust us, we know what really happened." But you changed that dynamic without even realizing it. You listened when your soulmate questioned themselves. You noticed contradictions without forcing answers. Most importantly, you made them imagine a life where they didn't need anyone else's permission to be authentic. That was why the relationship frightened certain people. It wasn't simply romance they feared. It was independence. Your soulmate's voice changed during the call. "You weren't protecting me from them," they said. You were protecting yourself from what I might become if I stopped believing you. And for the first time, the person on the other end had no convincing response. Then your soulmate received a notification. You had seen the message asking to meet. Suddenly, every secret became secondary to one terrifying reality: you might actually give them the chance to explain. They stared at your conversation, rehearsing the first sentence again and again. Should they begin with the family deception? Their own participation in it? Or the reason they disappeared when they wanted most to stay? Then your soulmate typed something far more vulnerable: "Before we meet, there's one thing I need you to understand. The person you cared about was real. But the life I showed you wasn't the whole truth." Their finger hovered over send. At that exact moment, the person on the phone finally broke the silence and said, "If you're really going to confess, then tell them what happened the night you decided to leave." Your soulmate's face changed instantly, because that night contained the one secret that could explain everything between you. That night had never been forgotten. Your soulmate had been ready to come toward you instead of running away. They had even prepared the words they wanted to say, because they were exhausted from allowing other people's expectations to decide what happened between you. But before they could reach you, they were confronted with information about their past and told that revealing the truth would create consequences for people they loved. They were given a choice that never felt like a real choice: continue toward you and risk exposing everything, or disappear quietly and preserve the story everyone had spent years protecting. Your soulmate chose silence. Not because their feelings disappeared, but because fear convinced them that leaving would cause less damage. They never imagined that their silence would become the deepest wound of all. Now they can finally see what that decision cost. By trying to protect everyone else, they left you without an explanation. You were forced to interpret distance that had nothing to do with your worth or the reality of the connection. Your soulmate remembers looking at your messages that night and wanting desperately to respond. They typed several answers, but every one was deleted. One sentence remained in their mind for years: "If you knew what was really happening, you would understand why I'm scared." But they never sent it. And this is where their confession becomes painfully honest. They cannot say, "Everyone made me do it," because ultimately, they were the one who walked away. They know that now. The lie may have been created around them, but the silence became their own. That is why saying, "I've been living a lie," means admitting not only who they really are, but